The woman who stole my husband was his daughter. Monday mornings at Harris Industries were always busy. Employees hurried across the polished marble lobby carrying coffee cups, laptops, and stacks of documents. Phones rang behind the reception desk while the elevator doors opened and closed every few seconds. It looked like an ordinary day, until the elevator doors opened one more time. A young woman stepped out, carrying a bouquet of fresh white lilies in one hand and a neatly wrapped gift in the other. She looked no older than 24, confident, excited, as if she had been waiting years for this moment. She smiled warmly at the receptionist. "Good morning. I'm here to surprise Daniel Harris." The receptionist returned the smile. "Do you have an appointment with Mr. Harris?" The young woman laughed softly. "No." She glanced toward the executive offices before lowering her voice. "He finally said he's ready for us to meet." The receptionist's smile faded just enough to notice. Nearby employees slowed their steps. One woman quietly stopped typing. Another pretended to organize papers while listening. Something about the young woman's confidence made everyone curious. Just then, the conference room doors opened. Victoria Harris stepped into the lobby. Elegant, calm, the kind of woman who carried herself with quiet confidence. She had been Daniel's wife for 20 years. As she walked past the reception desk, she heard the young woman say one more sentence. "I still can't believe he chose today." Victoria stopped. She turned slowly. "I'm sorry." The young woman looked at her politely. "Yes." Victoria offered a courteous smile. "Who exactly are you?" The young woman smiled back without hesitation. "My name is Emily Carter." Then she added the words that made the entire lobby fall silent. "I'm Daniel's girlfriend." The bouquet slipped from Emily's hand and landed softly on the polished floor. For a long moment, no one spoke. Victoria stared at the young woman. There was no anger in her face, only disbelief. Then, with slow, deliberate movements, she slipped off her wedding ring, held it in the palm of her hand, and quietly said, "That's strange." She looked directly into Emily's eyes. "Because I'm Daniel's wife." Emily's smile vanished. The color drained from her face. Her fingers loosened around the gift she had brought. It fell beside the flowers. The lobby became so quiet that even the receptionist stopped breathing for a moment. Emily looked from Victoria to the wedding ring and back again. Her lips trembled. "That's impossible." At that exact moment, the elevator doors opened again. Daniel Harris stepped into the lobby. He smiled, unaware that every pair of eyes had turned toward him. But the moment he saw the two women standing together, his smile disappeared. The other woman, Daniel, stood frozen just inside the lobby. He looked for Victoria, to the young woman, then down at the flowers scattered across the polished floor. The silence felt heavier than words. Victoria was the first to speak. Her voice remained calm. "Daniel, would you come with us, please?" She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse him. She simply turned toward her office. Emily hesitated before following. Daniel remained where he was for another moment, completely confused. Finally, he took a slow breath and walked after them. The office door closed behind them. Outside, employees exchanged nervous glances. No one returned to work. Inside, Victoria motioned for Emily to sit. Emily lowered herself into the chair, clutching the ribbon from the gift box that had fallen apart in the lobby. Daniel remained standing. He looked at Victoria, then at Emily. "I'm sorry," he said gently. "I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." Emily searched his face. She expected recognition, a smile, anything. Instead, she saw only confusion. "You really don't know who I am?" Daniel slowly shook his head. I'm afraid I don't. Emily frowned. She reached into her handbag and removed her phone. My name is Emily Carter. She unlocked the screen. I've been talking to you for almost 2 years. Daniel looked at the phone. I don't understand. Emily opened a conversation. Hundreds of messages filled the screen. Long conversations, late-night chats, birthday wishes, encouragement, words of comfort. She held the phone toward him. You wrote these. Daniel stared at the messages. His forehead tightened. I've never seen this account. Emily blinked. What? I don't even recognize the username. She laughed nervously. Please stop pretending. I'm not pretending. You told me you needed time. Daniel looked genuinely lost. I don't know what you're talking about. Emily scrolled through the conversation with trembling fingers. One message caught Victoria's attention. I've wondered about you every single day. Another. I hope one day we can finally sit together. Another. I'm finally ready for us to meet. Victoria's heart sank. She looked at her husband, then back at Emily. The messages sounded deeply personal. Yet Daniel looked as confused as she felt. Emily's voice became softer. You said you weren't ready because you felt ashamed. Daniel frowned. Ashamed of what? Of losing so many years. Daniel looked at Victoria. I swear to you, I have never written any of these messages. Victoria knew her husband well. She had watched him negotiate million-dollar contracts without losing his composure. She had seen him comfort grieving families after construction accidents. She knew the difference between guilt and confusion. This wasn't the face of a man caught in a lie. This was the face of someone desperately trying to understand what was happening. Emily slowly lowered the phone. For the first time since arriving, doubt crept into her eyes. If you didn't write them, then who did? No one had an answer. The room fell silent again. Emily looked down at the conversation that had changed her life. Every message, every promise, every hopeful word. Could 2 years of her life really have been built on a lie? Tears began filling her eyes. My mother always told me. She stopped herself. Daniel leaned forward. Told you what? Emily swallowed hard. She always said, you never knew I existed. The words hung in the air. Daniel's expression changed instantly. The confusion disappeared. Something else replaced it. Shock. He stared at Emily as though seeing her for the first time. His voice became barely a whisper. What did you just say? Emily looked directly into his eyes. My mother's name, she struggled to steady her voice, was Sarah Carter. Daniel's face turned pale. He took one slow step backward, then another. It felt as though the room had disappeared around him. A name he hadn't heard in 24 years had suddenly come back to life. The name. Daniel didn't speak. He couldn't. The name echoed through his mind like a voice from another lifetime. Sarah Carter. For 24 years, he had buried that part of his life beneath work, responsibility, and the family he had built with Victoria. He had never forgotten Sarah. He had simply convinced himself that remembering her too often would only bring pain. Now, standing in his office, he felt as though time itself had folded in half. Victoria quietly rose from her chair. She looked at Daniel with concern. You know her? Daniel nodded slowly. I knew her. His voice cracked. I loved her. Emily's eyes widened. My mother told the truth. Daniel looked at her. There was never a day when I stopped wondering what happened to Sarah. He lowered himself into a chair, his hands trembling. We met when we were both 23. His eyes drifted toward the window. I was helping my father build homes in a small town outside the city. Emily listened without moving. Daniel smiled sadly. Sarah worked at the county library. She loved old books. She always said every worn-out page had survived because someone believed it was worth keeping. A faint smile touched his face. She had a way of making ordinary moments feel unforgettable. His words carried him back through the years. He remembered warm summer evenings at the county fair, the smell of fresh popcorn, the Ferris wheel glowing against the night sky, Sarah laughing as she challenged him to carnival games she always won. He remembered dancing with her in the rain because neither of them wanted to run for shelter. He remembered sitting beside the river while she skipped stones across the water. She had leaned against his shoulder and whispered, "Promise me something." He smiled. "Anything, if life ever pulls us apart." She paused. "Don't stop looking for me." Daniel had laughed. "As if I ever could." The memory shattered. His smile disappeared. He closed his eyes. But life doesn't always ask permission. The room fell silent. Emily's voice was barely audible. "What happened?" Daniel took a slow breath. "I was offered a job in another city. It was supposed to be temporary. We promised we'd make it work. I called. I wrote. For a while, everything was fine." He swallowed hard. Then the calls stopped. The letters were returned. "I drove back months later, and her apartment was empty." Emily stared at him. "You didn't find her?" Daniel slowly shook his head. "No. I asked neighbors. No one knew where she'd gone. I searched for weeks." His shoulders slumped beneath the weight of old regret. Then months became years. "I told myself she must have moved on." His voice grew quieter. "I convinced myself she had found someone else." Victoria watched him carefully. She had known Daniel for more than 20 years. Yet she had never seen this side of him. This wasn't a man defending himself. This was a man mourning someone he had never stopped loving. Emily looked down at her hands. "My mother never married." Daniel's head lifted. "What?" Emily nodded. "She raised me alone. She never let anyone replace you." Daniel covered his mouth with his hand. Tears gathered in his eyes. "I didn't know." Emily's own eyes filled with tears. "She used to tell me that somewhere out there, my father had a kind heart." Daniel could no longer hold back his emotions. A single tear rolled down his face. "I would have come. If I'd known about you, I would have come." Emily wanted to believe him. Part of her did. But another part remembered 24 birthdays, 24 Christmas mornings, 24 years of wondering why she had never been enough. Before she could answer, something happened. A soft melody filled the room. Emily wasn't even aware she was humming. It was a habit she had carried since childhood whenever she became nervous. Daniel's head snapped toward her. His breathing stopped. He knew that melody. He had written it on an old guitar. For one person, Sarah. No one else had ever heard it. No one. Daniel stared at Emily in disbelief. His voice was barely more than a whisper. "Where did you learn that song?" "The song." Emily stopped humming. She looked at Daniel, surprised by the expression on his face. "What is it?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. His eyes remained fixed on her, as though he had just heard a voice from another lifetime. He slowly shook his head. "That song." His voice trembled. "Where did you learn it?" Emily looked confused. "I've known it for as long as I can remember." She smiled faintly through her tears. "My mother used to sing it to me every year on my birthday." Daniel closed his eyes. For a brief moment, the office disappeared. He was 23 again. A battered acoustic guitar rested across his lap. Sarah sat beside him on the porch of her grandmother's farmhouse, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and orange. Daniel laughed as he played a few clumsy notes. "I'm not much of a songwriter." Sarah nudged his shoulder. "You don't have to be. You only have to tell the truth." He looked at her and smiled. "The truth?" She nodded. "The truth always becomes someone's favorite song." Daniel began strumming again. Slowly, Carefully, the melody came first, then the words. Not because he planned them, but because they belonged to her. When he finished, Sarah wiped a tear from her cheek. I hope you never forget this. Daniel laughed. How could I? She rested her head on his shoulder. Promise me something. What? If we ever have a little girl? She smiled shyly. Sing this to her. Daniel grinned. Then we'd better have a little girl someday. The memory vanished. Daniel opened his eyes. His heart pounded against his chest. He looked at Emily. His voice barely rose above a whisper. My mother sang that to me every birthday, Emily repeated softly. She called it my lucky song. Daniel felt his knees weaken. Only Sarah could have known that melody. He had never written it down. He had never recorded it. He had never played it in front of anyone else. It had existed only between the two of them. Until now, Victoria watched the realization spread across Daniel's face. She quietly asked, Daniel. He slowly nodded without taking his eyes off Emily. I believe her. Emily's breath caught. What? He swallowed hard. I don't know how. I don't understand how life brought us here. But no one else could know that song. He stepped closer. His eyes searched her face. For the first time, he noticed things he had overlooked. The shape of her smile. The dimple that appeared when she tried not to cry. The way she tilted her head when she listened. They weren't copies of Sarah. They were reflections of himself. His voice cracked. You have my father's eyes. Emily blinked in surprise. What? Daniel smiled through tears. My father had those same green eyes. So do you? Emily had spent her entire life wondering whose features she had inherited. For years she had stared into mirrors, searching for someone she had never met. Now, someone was finally looking back at her with recognition. Tears streamed down her face. So, she struggled to speak. You really think? Daniel nodded slowly. I think. He paused, overcome with emotion. I think of my daughter. The words hung in the room like sunlight breaking through years of darkness. Emily wanted to believe them. She truly did. But another feeling rose inside her. Not joy, pain. 24 years of unanswered questions rushed back all at once. She took a step backward. Her voice trembled. If I'm really your daughter, then where were you? Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came. There was no simple answer. No sentence long enough to explain 2 lost decades. Emily wiped away her tears. I grew up watching other girls run into their father's arms. I learned to ride a bicycle by myself. I graduated without hearing anyone call me their little girl. She looked directly at Daniel. I kept wondering what was wrong with me. Daniel's heart broke. There was never anything wrong with you. Emily shook her head. Then why wasn't my father there? Silence filled the office. Daniel lowered his eyes. For the first time in years, he wasn't grieving the woman he had lost. He was grieving the daughter he had never known. And deep inside, he feared he might have found her too late. The truth she believed. The room remained silent. No one knew what to say. Daniel wanted to walk over and hug the daughter he had only just found. But he knew he hadn't earned that right. Not yet. Emily took a slow breath and wiped the tears from her cheeks. I need you to understand why I came here today. Daniel nodded. I'm listening. Emily looked down at her phone. It started almost 2 years ago. I got a message from someone using your name. I thought it was a mistake. She managed a small, sad smile. I almost deleted it. Victoria listened quietly from across the room. Emily continued. The first message said, I don't know if you'll ever forgive me for being absent from your life, but I've been thinking about you for a very long time. Emily swallowed hard. I read those words over and over. For the first time in my life, I thought my father had finally found me. Daniel lowered his head. Every word felt like another weight on his heart. Emily continued. The messages weren't romantic. They felt safe. They felt like someone trying to make up for lost time. She looked at Daniel. You asked about my work. You remember my birthday. You encouraged me to keep designing furniture. When I wanted to give up after my first business failed, you told me not to stop believing in myself. Daniel closed his eyes. He wished he had been the man who wrote those words. Emily's voice grew softer. Every message filled a hole I'd carried since I was a little girl. She looked away. I wasn't falling in love with a man. I was falling in love with the idea of finally having a father. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. For the first time, she truly understood. Emily had never come to steal her husband. She had come searching for her family. Emily unlocked her phone again. She opened the final conversation. This was the message that made me come here. She read it aloud. I'm finally ready for us to meet. Too many years have been lost. I don't want to lose another day. Emily looked up. I thought. She struggled to finish. I thought you meant you were finally ready to be my father. Daniel's voice barely escaped his lips. I wish I had written that. Emily looked at him. So do I. The words landed like a stone between them. Daniel slowly stepped forward. I'm so sorry. Emily immediately shook her head. Please don't apologize for something you didn't know. She paused. But there is something you need to admit. Daniel waited. Emily looked directly into his eyes. My mother disappeared from your life. Yes. You searched for her. I did. But eventually, her voice trembled. You stopped. Daniel couldn't deny it. He lowered his eyes. I did. Emily nodded sadly. My mother never stopped hoping you'd find us. The guilt hit him harder than anything else that morning. I told myself she'd moved on. Emily's expression softened, but only for a moment. And that made it easier to stop looking. Daniel couldn't answer. Because she was right. He had convinced himself of a story that allowed him to survive. But survival had come at a terrible cost. Emily slipped her phone back in her bag. I spent 24 years wondering why I wasn't enough. I know now that you didn't know I existed. She took a shaky breath. But knowing that doesn't erase 24 years. Daniel felt tears sting his eyes. I know. Emily picked up the gift she had brought. She looked down at it for a long moment. I spent weeks choosing this. She gave a small, heartbreaking laugh. It was supposed to be your first Father's Day gift. Daniel covered his mouth. He couldn't stop the tears anymore. Emily gently placed the unopened gift on Victoria's desk. I don't think you're ready to open it. Then she looked at Daniel one last time. I finally found my father today. She smiled through tears. And somehow, I still feel like an orphan. Without waiting for an answer, she turned and walked toward the door. Daniel instinctively took a step after her. Emily, she stopped, but she didn't turn around. I don't know if I'll ever be able to call you Dad. Her voice was barely above a whisper. But if you really want to be my father, don't chase me today. She reached for the door handle. Spend that time finding the truth. The door closed quietly behind her. Daniel stood motionless, staring at the empty doorway. Victoria walked over and gently took his hand. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, Victoria broke the silence. If those messages didn't come from you, she looked at him. Then someone spent 2 years trying to bring your daughter back into your life. Daniel slowly nodded. There's only one person who might know the truth. He whispered a single name. Margaret, Sarah's mother. And for the first time in decades, Daniel prepared to face the woman who knew how his first love story had really ended. The confession. Daniel drove in silence. Victoria sat beside him, watching the road disappear beneath the tires. Neither of them turned on the radio. Neither of them spoke. There were no words that could make sense of what had happened. After nearly an hour, Daniel turned onto a quiet country road lined with old oak trees. At the end of the lane stood a small white farmhouse. Tom seemed to have forgotten it. The porch swing moved gently in the afternoon breeze. Flower pots sat beneath the windows, their colors faded but carefully tended. Daniel stopped the car. He stared at the house. I haven't been here in almost 25 years. Victoria reached over and squeezed his hand. You don't have to do this alone. Daniel nodded. Together, they walked to the front door. Before Daniel could knock, the door slowly opened. Margaret Carter stood there. Her hair had turned completely silver. Her shoulders had grown smaller with age. But her eyes, he recognized those eyes immediately. They were the same gentle eyes Sarah had inherited. For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Margaret whispered, "Daniel." His name sounded as though it had been waiting years to be spoken. Daniel managed a weak smile. "Hello, Margaret." She looked past him and noticed Victoria. Then her eyes filled with tears. "You found Emily." Daniel nodded. "We met today." Margaret closed her eyes. A single tear rolled down her cheek. "So, it finally happened." She stepped aside. "Please come in." The living room looked almost unchanged. Old wooden furniture. A handmade quilt folded neatly across the sofa. Family memories filled every corner, not with photographs, but with carefully preserved keepsakes, Sarah's favorite books, an old music box, a tiny pair of children's shoes, and handcrafted toys she had saved over the years. Daniel looked around slowly. "It feels like yesterday." Margaret smiled sadly. "For me, it never stopped being yesterday." Everyone sat down. The silence lingered until Daniel finally asked the question that had been burning inside him. "Did Sarah know where I was?" Margaret lowered her eyes. "She tried to find you." Daniel leaned forward. "What happened?" "When Sarah discovered she was pregnant, she was terrified. She called the number she had. It had been disconnected. She wrote to the address she knew. The letters came back." Daniel stared at the floor. "I had already moved." Margaret nodded. "Your father sold the house after he retired. We didn't know where you'd gone." Daniel closed his eyes. "So she really tried." "Every day." Margaret's voice broke. "She never stopped believing she'd find you." Victoria quietly wiped away a tear. Margaret continued. "Sarah worked 2 jobs. She raised Emily with everything she had. But she never spoke badly about you. Whenever Emily asked where her father was, Sarah always answered the same way." She smiled through tears. "Your father doesn't know you exist." Daniel covered his face with both hands. His shoulders began to shake. Margaret waited until he regained his composure. Then she took a deep breath. "There is something else you deserve to know." She looked directly at him. "After Sarah died, Emily asked me a question I couldn't answer." Daniel looked up. "Why didn't my father want me?" Margaret's voice cracked. "I couldn't bear hearing her blame herself. So I started searching for you. I found your company. I saw interviews. I read every article I could find. I learned the kind of man you'd become." Daniel listened in silence. Margaret continued. "I created an anonymous online account. I told Emily that her father was ashamed of how much time had passed. I said he wanted to get to know her slowly before meeting her." Victoria frowned gently. "So every message." Margaret nodded. "I wrote every one." Daniel whispered. "You were trying to protect her. I was trying to save her." Margaret bowed her head. But somewhere along the way, she misunderstood. "I thought she saw those messages the way I intended. As a father reaching toward his daughter. I never realized she believed today would be something different." Tears streamed down her face. I should have told her the truth. I should have trusted that she was strong enough. Daniel remained quiet for a long moment. Then he asked softly, "Why didn't you tell me?" Margaret looked into his eyes. "Because every year that passed, it became harder. I was ashamed. I kept telling myself I'd do it tomorrow. Then tomorrow became 24 years. The room fell silent. Finally, Margaret looked at Daniel. "There isn't a single day I don't wish I had made different choices." Daniel slowly nodded. "I know what that feels like." Outside, the wind stirred the porch swing. Margaret looked toward the window. Then she whispered, "Emily believes she lost her father." She looked back at Daniel. "But the truth is, you both lost each other." The words settled heavily over the room. No one argued, because no one could. Regret. The drive home felt longer than the drive there. Daniel barely noticed the passing traffic. Margaret's words echoed through his mind. You both lost each other. He had spent years believing life had simply moved on. Now he realized it hadn't. It had only been waiting for the truth. When they reached home, Victoria quietly went inside. Daniel didn't. Instead, he walked toward the small workshop behind the house. It had always been his refuge. Whenever life became too loud, he came here to build something with his hands. The familiar scent of cedar and oak filled the room. Tools hung neatly on the walls. Half-finished projects rested on wooden benches. But in the far corner, one piece stood alone, an unfinished chair. Daniel walked toward it slowly. He brushed away a thin layer of sawdust with the palm of his hand. "I never finished you." His voice was almost a whisper. He remembered starting the chair nearly 2 years earlier. He had wanted to create something that would outlive him. Something simple, something meaningful. But no matter how many times he tried, he could never decide how to finish it. Now he understood why. It had been waiting for a story he didn't know he was living. Daniel sat on a nearby workbench and stared at the empty chair. His imagination quietly filled the silence. He saw a little girl standing beside a tiny bicycle. "Dad, can you let go now?" He imagined smiling. "I've got you." Then, in the next heartbeat, the image disappeared. The chair remained empty. Another memory appeared. A school auditorium. Children lined up on stage. Parents applauding proudly. One seat remained empty. The seat where father should have been. The vision faded. Again, only the unfinished chair remained. Then came another. A graduation ceremony. A young woman searching the crowd, finding everyone, except the one face she'd hoped to see. The empty chair. Another birthday. Another Christmas morning. Another milestone. Every memory into the same way. An empty chair. An empty place. An empty space where love should have been. Daniel lowered his head. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to cry without holding anything back. Not for Sarah, not even for himself, but for the daughter who had grown up believing she had never been wanted. The workshop door opened quietly. Victoria stepped inside. She didn't speak. She simply walked over and stood beside him. After a long silence, she rested her hand gently on his shoulder. "I've never seen you cry like this." Daniel gave a faint, broken smile. "I've never had a reason like this." Victoria looked at the unfinished chair. "It's beautiful." Daniel shook his head. "It's incomplete." "So am I." Another long silence settled between them. Finally, Daniel spoke. "There was something Emily said today." Victoria looked at him. "You stopped looking." He swallowed hard. She was right. Victoria didn't interrupt. "I searched. I really did. But after months passed, I started telling myself stories." He looked down at his hands. "I told myself Sarah had met someone else. I told myself she was happier without me. I told myself she'd forgotten me. His voice cracked, but none of that was true. He looked at Victoria with tears in his eyes. The truth was, I was afraid. Victoria frowned gently. Afraid of what? Daniel took a shaky breath. Afraid that if I kept searching, I'd eventually discover she had chosen a life that didn't include me. He closed his eyes, so I stopped. It hurt less to imagine an answer than to keep living without one. Victoria reached for his hand. You were young. I was a coward. She squeezed his hand gently. No, you were a man who made a painful mistake. There's a difference. Daniel looked at the unfinished chair again. I can't give Emily her childhood. I can't teach her to ride a bicycle. I can't clap for her at her graduation. I can't read her bedtime stories. His voice almost disappeared. I missed everything. Victoria stepped in front of him. She waited until he looked into her eyes. No, you missed yesterday. She placed one hand on the unfinished chair. But tomorrow is still waiting. Daniel stared at her. She smiled softly. You can't ask Emily to erase 24 years. But you can spend the rest of your life making sure she never doubts that she's loved again. Those words settled deep inside him. For the first time since meeting Emily, Daniel felt something other than grief. He felt purpose. He stood up, walked to his workbench, picked up a pencil, then carefully wrote 2 words across the unfinished design plans. Second chance. Victoria smiled. What are you doing? Daniel ran his fingers across the smooth wood. I don't know if Emily will ever forgive me. He looked at the chair. But one day, if she's willing, I'd like her to have something her father actually made for her. Outside, the first rays of morning sunlight began to shine through the workshop window. For the first time in 24 years, Daniel stopped mourning the life he had lost and quietly began building the one he still hoped to have. The second chance. 6 months passed. Life didn't erase the pain. It simply gave everyone a choice about what to do with it. Daniel never pressured Emily. He didn't call repeatedly or appear uninvited. Every few weeks, he sent a simple message. I hope you're doing well. Congratulations on your latest design. I'm proud of you. Sometimes Emily replied. Sometimes she didn't. Daniel accepted both. He knew trust was rebuilt with patience, not speeches. During those months, he returned to his workshop almost every evening, finishing the chair he had once abandoned. Every piece was carefully measured, sanded, and carved with the love he wished he had given his daughter years ago. When it was finally finished, he ran his hand across the polished wood and whispered, I should have built this years ago. A few weeks later, Emily invited Daniel and Victoria to the grand opening of her first furniture showroom. At the bottom of the invitation was a handwritten note. I hope you'll come. Daniel smiled. I'll be there. The showroom buzzed with visitors admiring handcrafted furniture, while soft piano music filled the room. At the center stood a single chair on a raised platform. It wasn't for sale. A plaque beside it read, The Second Chance Chair. Then Daniel and Emily saw each other across the room. For a moment, neither moved. Finally, Emily smiled and walked toward him. So you came. You invited me. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure I deserved to. Emily's eyes filled with tears. My grandmother once told me that forgiveness isn't pretending the past never happened. It's deciding the past doesn't get to decide the future. Daniel nodded. I'm still learning how to be your father. And I'm still learning how to be someone's daughter. Emily rested her hand on the chair. I spent my whole life saving a place in my heart for someone I thought would never come. She looked directly into his eyes. I don't want to keep saving it anymore. Her voice trembled. It was always yours. She smiled through tears. "Will you take your seat?" "Dad." The single word broke him. Tears streamed down Daniel's face as he slowly walked to the chair and sat down. It wasn't a chair of perfection. It was a chair of hope, forgiveness, and second chances. Emily knelt beside him and gently held his hand. "I miss so much," Daniel whispered. "We both did," Emily replied. "But we're here now." Victoria quietly placed another chair beside Daniel and sat down. Emily pulled over a third chair. 3 chairs, 3 people, 1 family. Above them hung a carved wooden sign, Carter and Harris Designs. Daniel looked at it and smiled. "I think your mother would be proud." Emily nodded, tears shining in her eyes. "I think she'd be proud of all of us." Daniel wrapped one arm around Emily and reached for Victoria's hand. No one spoke again. They didn't need to. The camera slowly pulled back. 3 chairs, 3 hearts, 1 family that almost lost everything, but finally found their way home. Final narration. The woman who walked through those doors believed she was meeting the man who had abandoned her. Instead, she found a father who had spent a lifetime searching for forgiveness. Some families are born together. Others are reunited through truth, patience, and grace. The years they lost could never be returned, but the years ahead belonged to them. And for the first time in 24 years, the empty chair was empty no more. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to MindShadow Stories. Your support helps us continue sharing unforgettable stories of family, redemption, forgiveness, and second chances. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.